Sister Eve, a local nun who came roaring up to the monastery grounds around lunchtime on a motorcycle. A close friend of Kelly's brother, Eve was a colleague she had met before who had apparently left the community, according to Anthony, and was not wearing the traditional habit when they met. The two women had spoken previously on a number of occasions about their interest in and devotion to Sister Maria de Jesus de Agreda, and Sister Eve had seemed quite excited about the keynote address Dr. Middlesworth was scheduled to make at the early morning session. She had even expressed her hopefulness that this conference about the venerated nun would finally bring news that progress had been made in Sister Maria's beatification process. Of course, Kelly knew there was no such actual news of forward progress in the beatification process to share, but she hadn't told the nun. And with the news of Anthony's discovery that she was planning to introduce at her keynote, Dr. Middlesworth was actually just as hopeful that what they all wanted might finally come to pass. She picked up the tray and turned back to re-enter her room, but glanced around once more at the parked cars, wondering if Dr. Pierce had left Austin, if he was somewhere close to New Mexico. In their last conversation, he had said that he was taking a late flight out of Texas to Albuquerque without his wife, Kelly recalled him saying, and was not scheduled to arrive until sometime around midnight. He had promised to meet her first thing the following morning. He would call and then stop by her room, and that way she could show him the pages before she gave her address. She couldn't help herself and smiled, thinking about her colleague, thinking about how thrilled he was to hear about the papers, how he'd promised to host a great celebration party when they returned to the university, and how he had also shared the news that he was now ready to file for divorce. Kelly couldn't decide what made her happier, the discovery of writings by Sister Maria, or that she was finally going to be able to marry the man she loved. She felt her face flush with excitement as she turned to walk back inside, and then stopped just as she entered, sticking out her right foot behind her to close the door. She walked all the way inside the small room and set the tray next to her laptop computer on the desk. When she did so, she pushed aside a stack of books, which consequently slid down, ultimately exposing the thick, unmarked brown envelope that had been placed underneath them. Kelly looked first at the envelope, then back at the door, thinking about locking it, and then remembered that there were no locks on the doors at the Abbey. She sighed, tugged her long curly brown hair behind her ears, turned back to the desk, and lifted the lid off the teapot to make sure the bags were steeping. As she sat in the chair by the desk, she thought once again about her brother, and particularly the argument they'd had in the dining room earlier that evening. She recalled how Anthony had slammed down his dinner tray when she explained her plan to share the news in her keynote address, how he stormed out after she confessed to him that she had already told someone else. She thought about the awkwardness that remained in the dining room and how she sat alone at the table while the others sitting near her stopped talking and watched until she finally got up from her seat, left the main house, and hurried back to her room. It had been terribly embarrassing, and as she glanced at her watch, realizing it had been several hours since dinner, she could only hope that none of those at the evening meal would bring up what happened at her all-important morning presentation. She breathed out a long breath, knowing that she needed to make things right with her brother. Even Peter had mentioned that she should try to make amends when she told him earlier about the argument, and she hoped that the tea meant Anthony had forgiven her. She reached for the envelope and pulled out the papers to examine them once again, still in shock that she had such a thing in her possession. It was hard to believe that Anthony had just happened upon something so valuable while visiting the little church south of Albuquerque. His discovery consisted of pages from the 1600s, written by Sister Maria de Jesus de Agreda. During